So the end of 2021 is finally upon us, and I'm going to be doing a big Roundup review. I feel like there's nothing really more to say other than these are movies that I missed all throughout the year. This is part one of that video. This is where I'm going to go more in depth with these, with these movies and really to talk to you guys about them. And then in the next video will be a lightning round and we'll be in live action. Will be me in person. So yeah, let's just get right into it with the first movie. Definitely not what I was expecting out of this one. This A24 horror Saint Maud was for sure something different. She seemed to be almost completely ambiguous and restrained with not only story details, but the true horror of this film as well. The movie gives you little to no detail to what's going on, and for most of the runtime can feel pretty aimless. Even if the cinematography is stellar, even if the plot on the surface is structurally sound, and even if the performances are solid, the film as a whole is just too ambiguous, at least for myself. I never really found the horror to be that effective, cutting itself too short when it picks up with any momentum. That doesn't stop the movie from being entertaining as an experience, though. Saint Maud, for as much as it can be a little weak below the surface, is still a wild ride that kept me guessing throughout. Where the script can really lack substance, the direction from Rose Glass is what makes things interesting. The presentation of this week's script is something to be really admired, as it can get so much out of a brittle structure. Overall, I would recommend the very eccentric horror flick on a pure cinematic level. Light B. One of the many classic TV shows I've never gotten around to seeing, The Sopranos is something that people have been imploring me to binge. Over and over I'm told how incredible it is, and it's almost a daunting task at this point as it has become the Citizen Kane type. So I was hoping to use this movie as a jumping on point. From what I understand, no prior knowledge was really needed to enjoy the movie, so I went in with average expectations, hoping it would be a good jumping on point. That really isn't what I got. The movie is fine. Competent acting and cinematography kind of dress it up as being something truly special, but it goes nowhere fast once you hit the play button. This is a slow 2 hours and extremely dialogue-heavy film, and honestly that's all to really say about this one. 2 hours of fine performances, cool cinematography, and a decent enough story. Not a single aspect of this film really leaned in any direction of strong feelings. Nothing was overly bad and nothing stood out great. The majority of the movie was just fine, other than some of the cool visual scenes. This might possibly be the most C+ movie I've ever seen. A movie that slipped through the cracks for me was David Bruckner's The Nighthouse, which released earlier this year. Even if I was interested in checking it out at first, especially remembering the potential that was found in The Ritual, a movie I gave a C+ to back in 2018, other bigger horror releases like Candyman and Malignant kind of distracted me at the time. Which is pretty unfortunate because The Nighthouse is a damn solid horror flick. It's not without its issues. The supporting cast is extremely weak, providing performances that feel almost amateurish when compared to Rebecca Hall's phenomenal outing here. There aren't a ton of characters, so it isn't a glaring issue, but both Evan Joinkst and Vondi Curtis Hall are both really not that great, and most disappointingly, Sarah Goldberg's performance just doesn't do anything for me here. She feels so stock and filler, which is frustrating because I've seen how incredible she can be in other projects. She's brilliant in the show Barry. I digress. The supporting cast really can hinder some parts of the movie and distract from the real meat of the story. Also, some of the scenes can drag out quite a bit. The pacing of the film isn't what it should be and spends too much time in the quiet moments, never letting the genuinely shocking horror land with much of a punch. But that's not what I really want to focus on for this flick, because I genuinely thought The Nighthouse was a really solid outing. The extremely bleak, grieving tones hits with an impact and is propelled by Hall's incredible performance here. Not only is the horror shocking, but when it lets it off its leash, so to speak, it can be pretty tense. Despite many of his faults as a filmmaker, Bruckner understands how to make a creepy film and succeeds majorly with this one. Not only that, but the movie's writing lets it be extremely poignant and brutally honest with its subject matter. Despite some of the spottier elements of the movie holding it back from being something truly great, I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I'm going to give The Nighthouse a solid B. This is a frustrating one, and before anyone just hears that first sentence and immediately gets out the pitchforks, I really liked Free Guy. I enjoyed my time with this movie way more than I ever thought I could, and it honestly put me in a much better mood than I was before pressing play. The direction from Sean Levy is rock solid, easily his best work, pretty much ever. Ryan Reynolds was extremely criticized in this one for kind of just doing his usual Deadpool shtick, but I think that's a pretty unfair assessment. I honestly really loved his performance, kind of playing himself but in a role that absolutely needed that kind of performance out of him. Taika Waititi was hilarious. Maybe not his best role, but that man basically can do no wrong at this point. And Judy Comer and Joe Carey giving excellent performances here, really coming into their own. Both having a real connection with each other and bringing out the best of their characters. Also, the movie is just endlessly entertaining. Once it starts to pick up steam, it started to hit every beat perfectly, never missing a stride. Each scene kept topping itself with how genuinely funny, action-packed, and even somewhat kind of a little thought-provoking they were. That's right, this extremely silly and corny action flick has a lot to say about the gaming industry as a whole. What's even crazier is that those messages and themes are pulled off in the right way, never trying to be preachy but still sneaking them in there with enough weight behind them. This is exactly the kind of mainstream movie I've been aching for. The movie perfected the modern mainstream action comedy, and I was ready to sing the highest of praises for it. But then the last 30 minutes or so. Ugh. The ending of this movie is what I was referring to at the top of this review. Free Guy grinds to a halt so hard that the wheels almost completely come off for me. It leans way too hard in the cheese factor, and the self-referencing humor, it just gets to be too much. It leans so far into the direction of making fun of modern action comedies that it becomes just another modern action comedy, which really just sucks. The first 20 minutes of this film also aren't that great. So when it's all said and done, I can't say that Free Guy is one of the best movies of the year. It pained me not to give the movie a higher score than I'm going to, solely based on the fact that I had such a good time with this movie and will be revisiting a lot. It's the perfect fun movie and genuinely does some great things. However, it really did not stick the landing, and some of the cornier elements of the film started to really stick out once it was all said and done. Sadly, I'm only going to give Free Guy an extremely strong B. Normally, I wouldn't cover straight-to-DVD DC animation like both of these films. Even if I am a pretty big fan, they are too niche to really talk about on the broader scheme of movies as a whole. However, these two seem to have gained popularity outside the realm of DC fans, and I couldn't be happier. Not only have I been waiting for a full-on, on-screen adaptation of one of my favorite comic books of all time, but the DC animated films were also getting some light shed on them, which is always something I'm going to be happy about. As for the movies themselves, they didn't disappoint in the slightest. Batman The Long Halloween really made me smile despite the dark nature of the story. Finally, we had gotten to see a true Batman detective story played out on the screen, and that tone of the movie was just handled wonderfully. Feeling like a modern noir, the movie isn't afraid to take its time unraveling the complicated mystery of who is the holiday killer. It doesn't shy away from showing the more human aspects of the story as well. It was also neat remembering just how much the story influenced other Batman films, especially The Dark Knight. The pacing is excellent, the tone is perfect, the story was extremely riveting. Very glad with the direction they chose for this one. This is going to be up there with some of my favorite Batman movies for sure, even if I have one major problem with it. The animation is just plainly not good. I do like the style quite a bit, but the actual animation itself really could have used some work. Feeling incredibly stiff and lifeless, if there was a decent amount more polish to it, I think it wouldn't bother me as much. But it can really take you out of a scene and could cause several awkward moments. Batman The Long Halloween Parts 1 and 2 was a hell of a way to adapt this story, and I'm going to give both of them a solid B+. This was a movie I wasn't anticipating seeing until some of the trailers started to surface back up in September. What at first glance seemed like a standard sports drama turned out to be a really solid character piece on the Williams family as a whole. From start to finish, this movie genuinely puts a lot of care into building a relationship between the family and the audience. But in the end, you feel like you've truly been there with the Williams, and that is something I can't be said about a ton of films out there. The writing is very well rounded, giving the movie a sense of inspiration as well as all good sports dramas must have, but a genuine connection to the themes and emotions being displayed throughout the story. Not only was I actively rooting for the family to succeed, but enticed by the different circumstances and challenges they would face. Will Smith is the main talking point when it comes to King Richard for most people, and it's completely justified. Smith gives a genuine Oscar-worthy performance here, showing off a side of himself that none of us have seen before. He loses himself in the character and gives an absolute tour de force. John Bernthal was excellent. I don't know how to say her name. Ellis was also terrific. This is an all-around feel-good movie that packs quite a bit of a punch when it comes to the filmmaking aspects. It can be predictable at times, following the same beaten path as other sports movies before it, but it stands out amongst the crowd as being exceptionally well made and genuinely moving. King Richard gets a strong B+. Kind of a weird one to talk about now. This was a Disney animated movie that really just got swept under the rug for no reason at all. There was a credible amount of hype heading into it. Critics and audiences both loved it, and there was a decent marketing push for the House of Mouse. Why did this movie just kind of disappear? Why did Disney just dump it onto Disney Plus barely even a month after it was released to theaters? After seeing the movie for myself, I can sort of see why. Don't get me wrong, I really enjoyed Encanto. The animation was stunning, the story fell in line with the classic Disney formula perfectly, and feeling like a fairy tale that has been passed down from generation to generation was just a nice touch. It hit all the beats you would want from a classic Disney movie. But that may be its biggest problem. The movie is very formulaic and had an extremely simple story. Even if the characters are vibrant and the visuals are constantly keeping you entertained, there's not that much under the surface to truly love with Encanto. Especially when compared to the studio's last movie, Raya and the Last Dragon, it can feel a little hollow. Still enjoy my time with this one though, Encanto gets a light B. This is a prequel that virtually no one asked for, and a movie I have almost no opinion on. Even if I enjoyed Army of the Dead quite a bit, I wasn't clamoring for more with this cast of characters. Army of Thieves is a serviceable movie. The action is fine, the pacing is alright. It's a pretty breezy 2 hours, so there's that. I'm not quite sure what to add with this movie because I could recommend it to virtually no one. Even when I absolutely rip into a terrible movie, give it my lowest grade possible, I can still recommend it for the experience. Even movies that I can admit aren't for me, I think someone else could enjoy it. But with Army of Thieves, I really couldn't see how anyone would walk away from it with anything but indifference. Besides the god-awful script this movie is sporting, there's no real talking points to take away from it. It's just another heist thriller to kind of fill the void, which is a little bit of a shame. Army of Thieves gets a C+. A movie I was 100% not planning on seeing whatsoever. Anyone who knows me is fully aware of my hesitation when it comes to musicals. Usually, when I found out a particular movie I'm interested in as a musical, I distance myself for as far away as possible. For no good reason either. I just have never been able to get myself to press play on most that have come out this year. For years, I held the belief that they were cheesy, tonal messes that just weren't for me. But once I heard the buzz surrounding this movie, the hype ended up getting to me, and I'm so glad that it did. Tick, Tick, Boom is an exceptionally well-crafted directorial debut from Lin-Manuel Miranda, proving he does much better work behind the camera than in front of it. This movie was pretty much riveting from the start. The music is catchy and poignant, the perfect balance for a movie. The direction from Miranda is surprisingly excellent. The dialogue had me intrigued the entire runtime. Tick, Tick, Boom really surprised me with how much of range it had in terms of emotion, generally tugging at the heartstrings and showcasing a realistic depiction of someone dedicated to their passion, especially in the realm of arts. And holy shit, Andrew Garfield is phenomenal in this thing, completely immersing himself in this role and just having a complete home run of a performance. My only gripe with the film is that, from a writing perspective, it can be pretty uneven, bouncing around a little too much and creating too much of a pacing issue. Other than that, Tick, Tick, Boom is one of my favorite films of the year so far and truly the most surprising favorite of mine this year. A-. Pig was something that was on my watch list for quite a while. Seeing how other people have gushed over this movie for the past couple of months since it's released, even if I haven't been a fan of Nick Cage's recent work really at all, especially after the fairly mediocre Willy's Wonderland earlier this year, but I was still hopeful for the movie as it seemed to be something completely different from everything else he's been involved with recently. And thankfully, I was right, as Pig was something completely different than what I was expecting. Even if I'm not in love with this as much as some, the movie was still extremely effective in being this deeply personal, emotional, and artful indie movie that packs such a heavy punch in the feels. A slow burn in the truest sense, it reveals its true self the more and more it unfolds, and you will for sure will have you on board by the last couple of scenes. The writing is strong, both Nick Cage and Alex Wolff give excellent performances, and honestly, this was just a highly effective movie. Its themes are conveyed in just the right way, the emotions are dialed up to just the right number. The only real issue I have with Pig is its cinematography not really being the greatest. Using too many close-ups and the lighting felt very off in a lot of scenes. But don't sleep on this movie if you haven't already seen it. Definitely worth at least one watch, and is very effective as being its own standalone story. B+. So that's it for part 1 of this Roundup review. Let me know what you guys think of this format. This will not be the format for the next video because I'm going to be talking about so many movies, not just 10, that I'm going to need just quick little bursts. So anyway, I will see you guys in a little bit with that video.